The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Hello again. This is Ralph Boehm, Legislative Update, and with me again is my former co-host, and back again, Erica Layon, who's now no longer in education. We mentioned that before. She's now the Vice Chair of Health and Human Resources, Health and Human Services.
Yes.
But anyway, so we're going to be going over a bill that she put into education, and then maybe in a couple of weeks she'll come back and go over some of the bills that she's got in Health and Human Services, some of the big ones, and we'll go, because we're having a session on the 10th to vote for more stuff. So hopefully we can come back right after that and do some update. So anyway, so tonight, or whenever this is on, we're going to cover homeschooling. And just to do there are 4 classifications of education in New Hampshire. Okay, there's a public schools, including charter schools and public academies such as Pinkerton. Private schools such as St. Francis, Bishop Girton, etc. EFA, education freedom accounts, which can, you get money from the state to go to any of the private schools or homeschooling, but then they're not homeschooling, they're EFA students. Okay, then there's homeschooling. Homeschooling, nobody gets any money for homeschooling. It's all on their own. And homeschooling has the least government involvement. And a little history, back in 2010, some bills were introduced to put government control on homeschooling. Reps Hall was packed with homeschooling parents and their kids objecting to the bills. The bills failed. But then the DOE then tried to put in rules based on the law that just failed. That didn't go anywhere, thank you. So in 2011, new term, multiple bills were put into free homeschooling from state involvement. I was put in charge of a subcommittee to work on these bills, and the present law is the result of that. If you want to look at home education laws, it's RSA 193. So 193 covers homeschooling. 193A:5, for example, we'll go back and we can pull it up. Notification. One of the first things was you had to notify your school district or the DOE every year. We changed that to notify them once, and that was it. And then if you stop homeschooling, then you notify you're not doing it anymore. And then 193A:11. And that was a good one, because what was happening was on the seacoast. Always seem to have problems with that. On the seacoast, they were trying to pass local rules for homeschooling pretty much based on anything in the education. So this was one we had put in saying, no superintendent, school board, school principal, or other school district official shall propose, adopt, or enforce any policy or procedure governing home education pupils that is inconsistent or more restrictive than the provisions of this chapter 193. So that you can't use what they were trying to do is, well, you got to go to school 180 days, you got to go this number of hours. No. And that was what some school districts were trying to do. So we fixed that in law. They can't do that. And then also 193A:10 was, there is the Home Education Advisory Council. And this is where also you can go to get information about homeschooling. It's evenly divided. There are, 6 and 6. Okay, 6 members of home education community and 6. And now initially it used to be 2 reps and 1 senator. That's fine, except my bill, when I did it, made them non-voting members, so it kept the politics out of it. Okay, so, and then 193A:6, which is something I believe in, what we're going to talk about in Erica's bill, was about making rules. I mean, doing evaluations, keep making a profile, and whatnot, portfolio for students, which you might need. I mean, every parent probably do something like that, but, and whether or not you can do any state mandated stuff. But I added in item B, and any of this stuff that you don't do, for example, shall not be used as a basis for termination of a home education program. So now I guess turn it over to Erica on HB 163 that she's putting in a bill.
Yes, it's House Bill 1663. It's building on the great work done by Ralph and some of the other representatives who were in back in 2011, 2012. They did a great job reducing the burden on the homeschool community, but in the 10 years since, there's been some confusion over some of the things, especially when we had all of the new homeschoolers come in, leaving the schools because of COVID. People were a lot more concerned trying to figure out exactly how to notify. There was some confusions with it, so we had people that weren't sure exactly what you did if you moved. They weren't sure exactly who they should notify when they were going back to school once they were comfortable to get back in there. So by amending this bill, by having this bill in here, we have it so that it's a lot more clear about who you notify, because before you were sending it to people that you hadn't told you were homeschooling in the first place, and that just didn't make much sense. So that's a lot more straightforward if this bill passes, and that's going to be helpful as parents are trying to focus on how to get the best education for their student and not who to notify and when and what to do if they move. These are families that take education very seriously, and focusing on which curriculum to use, how to mix and match, and how to best suit your student should be what's taking their attention, not the notification process.
Could you, I know you homeschooling your students, and I think maybe we should go through a little bit on the homeschool community, you might say. In other words, you don't have to teach your kids everything. There are other homeschooling, so maybe you can cover how that works and that.
Oh, absolutely. So when you're homeschooling, you're taking control of your child's education, but you can direct it. So you can choose, if you're not very strong in math, you can work with a math tutor. If you have a couple families on the street that are all homeschooling and there's different strengths, different parents can take over those different roles. And as the communities have grown, there have been more co-ops that have formed, so they're cooperative. They come in, they have parents that are teaching. There's some that are religious, some that are secular, and there's just a huge community of these communities across New Hampshire. So the parents still remain very involved in what's going on and which classes they're selecting, how they're satisfying all of the education as a whole child, not just in the co-ops. And it's really beautiful how these kids have their own school community, even though it's not really a school. They're just learning centers and that sort of thing, because these facilities don't provide all their education. It's just another learning opportunity. And that's the beauty of homeschooling. The world is a learning opportunity, and you can take advantage of that. And before COVID, there were so many activities that we could have been out of the house all day, every day, all week. There wouldn't have been enough time to sit down and do our work. And now that's coming back, and it came back, I think, a lot stronger than some of the other more traditional schooling approaches. So this is actually one of the things that is specified in House Bill 1663. There was all of this myth around some 50% rule that to homeschool you had to do more than 50% of the direct instruction to your student, which never was in the rules, never was in the laws, but that was it was throughout the community, and everybody was really worried about how they would deal with that. So the language will be changed from home education shall be provided by a parent for his own child. It'll be changed to home education shall be provided, coordinated, or directed by a parent for his or her own child. Just to make it clear that you're not restricted from accessing all of these resources. It's great to go to an expert. It's wonderful. You can have 3D printing classes. My boys are actually in one as 7 and 9-year-olds, which is pretty fantastic.
Now, just on a point, there are more than 6,000 homeschool students in New Hampshire. Also, homeschool students can go to their public school for a class, or also for sports and extracurricular activities. The law says that that the schools have to be open. I mean, these people are in your town paying taxes, property taxes, just like everybody else, school taxes. So I've known people that have just taken like the chemistry class at the school. I've also known they also can try out for the sports. I mean, and one of the problems I've seen over the years is that sometimes that doesn't always work on the sports program, because I know one family tried to get their son who was taking a course, then he tried out for basketball and didn't make it. So the family moved to Nashua, and he made the basketball team in Nashua. Oh, wait a minute, you can't make the basketball team in a small town, but you can make it in a big town. So there's actually some problems there, but by law, they have to give the homeschool student the same right as the student going to. And the state then pays, for example, if they go to one class, they might get 1/10 of the adequacy aid from the state for that student. I mean, but the student can take those courses at their regular school.
Yes, that's called equal access, and there was problems this year too. They had some students who were in band, and they weren't allowed in because of COVID. They were allowed to Zoom in for band. And COVID exposed a lot of flaws in the system, but they were already there. A lot of the school boards, they need to provide equal access, because these students by law are able to access their local public school because they pay for them, just like everybody else does. But the school boards didn't all have policies on how to do this. There are great policies in place at some school boards. So House Bill 663 changes it from saying the local school board may adopt a policy regulating participation to shall adopt a policy regulating the
Yeah, and that's right there on line 5 in the bill, if you want to
Yes.
push that up. And it says right there that the local school board shall adopt a policy regulating participation. I must have missed that 10 years ago. But anyway.
Well, it's a lot easier as everybody's getting started to say may.
Right.
Because the school boards adopt so many different policies, it doesn't seem like it should be a problem. 10 years later, we know it is.
Right,
But there's
yeah.
great policies, so it'll be easy for them to adopt a good policy. So another one of the things here is standardized tests. If you are in a public school, you can opt out of standardized tests. If you're in a private school, you can opt out of standardized tests. In home education, you can do a portfolio review or something else, but if you do a standardized test, it doesn't count unless you hit the 40th percentile. And that just seemed so odd to me when I was starting homeschooling, because standardized tests are a really good skill to have, but maybe you're not so great at taking a test. I know there's a few people like that. And what if you're learning at a higher level, and so you want to push yourself and you want to try taking the test a little bit more advanced? Let's say you get a 39, 2 grades past where you are. Does that mean you need to go back and take another standardized test? And then we have a lot of special education students that have left the school districts because what they need is a more individualized approach and just that focus that they can get at home. There's a lot of resources for those too, but if you have a special education student who is well below grade level, they're not going to be able to hit that 40th percentile. So this bill removes that testing standard, the testing level, where anybody below 40%, it doesn't count, because it's not fair to have that for the only students who can't receive funding from the state.
Right.
So it seems common sense to me.
I know, because here in the public school, if a public school student gets lower than that, no big deal. They're still going to give them money. But here we have homeschool students that aren't getting any money from the state and whatnot, and they have to meet a higher threshold than the public school students. What's wrong with this picture? And the public school students can opt out of the testing, of the state testing. Hello? I mean, so it should be the same, better for homeschool students, because the state's not giving them any money. Also, interesting, some years ago, there was a family that lived across the street from me that had some kids they were homeschooling, and every year they sent the kid in to do the standardized test at the school. And so they came back and said, well, they told the parent, he's a little low in math. And they said, well, wait a minute, he should be pretty good. Well, on the 5th grade test, no, he's only in the 4th grade. So he passed the 5th grade, but he was a little low. So, I mean, so yeah, I mean, so this is good. You keep a portfolio, because homeschool students, what I've heard and seen over the years, I mean, colleges just swap them up. I mean, they know they're doing a whole lot better than public school students or even private school students. And the parent determines there are online courses, there are all this stuff that it's a very good internet. They can go and find out what to do and whatnot. So, yeah.
And the portfolios are great too. If you have a kid who's more theatrical, they might put on a production or make a video that shows what they're learning. And it's nice that it is flexible for that. This also makes clear that the portfolio is property of the parents, just because they're not allowed to ask to give it to them. It can be reviewed, but the more that we can make the law clear, the better it'll be. So hopefully it'll be more than 10 years before we come back into 193A again.
Yeah, especially since schools can't do anything other than 193 for rules like they used to.
And there's one other part of it too, repealing the rulemaking authority. Homeschooling is really straightforward here in New Hampshire, and there's not that many rules about it. But as you pointed out, back in 2010, they were trying to make the rules bring in failed bills. So while things have been going very well lately, it's always better to close that door and make it so that a very simple program can't be messed up in the future.
Right.
You know, if it has to come through the legislature, and that's the right way to do it.
Right. And the thing is, I don't believe, unless it happened last Tuesday when I was there, that we in the committee haven't voted on this yet. But we will next Monday or Tuesday got to get them done.
Yes.
When are you meeting next, or have you finished all your bills?
We're meeting next on the 7th and 8th.
Okay, so.
We had people who had plans to go out of town this coming week for school vacation.
I know it. I mean, we are too, unfortunately.
Well, we have half the bills
we got
you
this
do.
week off, so I want to stop in and see some of your members. Anyway, but for those that haven't heard, I had a medical emergency during the governor's speech last Thursday. So anyway, no big deal. The governor called me up and said, I know we don't agree on everything, but did you have to, And when I called him back, I said, well, I could have ended it sooner. But, he would joke about it. But it was only at the last couple of minutes of his speech. I had gotten up to talk to another rep because he was finishing about a bill I had in another committee, putting an amendment in, and the next thing I knew, there were people all around me.
When that happened, everybody just turned in shock and acted. We had somebody who is normally an incident commander who made sure that things were going on. We had retired spine surgeons and hand surgeons right there helping out. We had a senator who I handed a phone over to dispatch so that they'd know what was going on. We had other people doing crowd control, and everybody else just staying where they were. There were a couple of spontaneous prayer circles that happened just right where people were standing. But everybody pulled together.
Because I didn't know what was going on myself. I didn't know.
Yeah. Well, and everybody pulled together. Senator, representative, Democrat, Republican, none of that mattered. None of that mattered at all because one of ours was down. And we are so happy that you're okay. So happy.
The thing is, it's funny. I guess that if you're gonna have a medical emergency, that's the best place to do it. We have nurses that are reps, and we have doctors and everything else. EMTs. And what I found out though, we weren't in Concord. We were in Manchester at the DoubleTree in their big conference room where they have the home shows and all that. And at the concrete floor. So somebody said it was a real loud noise as my head hit the floor. But I don't know, I got a little bump, but nothing much. But what's funny about it, the Manchester Fire Department, that's not that far away from, was watching it on TV. And they were on their way because when I woke up, the fire department was there. And I'm going, that's the first time I've ever seen a fire department that fast. But they were on their way before they got the 911 call. So.
And we were a mile or two from CMC, so you didn't even have far to go.
Right. And I thought I'd go to CMC because I was never been there. Oh, and by the way, this is only the third time in my life I ever spent a night in the hospital. And CMC, they were great. The nurses and everything. But the thing was, it was like, I've been to hospital for emergency room, for doing stupid things. You know, breaking motorcycle accident and all that kind of stuff, and day surgeries and stuff like that, but only third time overnight. You know, so that was okay. So, and I just, like I said, that's the best place for doing something like that. So anyway, we all done with 663?
I think we are. Hopefully
Okay.
it comes out of the committee well and gets through the House, the Senate, and the governor, because that'll
Okay.
make people's lives a lot easier.
Right, yeah, just changing a little bit. Okay, but hopefully it comes, I mean, I think we're gonna vote on that the 7th or 8th also. But anyway, okay, now there's a lot of stuff going around about House Bill 1671. This is the adequate education bill. I'm getting constant emails about it. We're doing away with music. We're doing away with art. No, we're not. I tried to do the same thing, I think, 12 years ago, because music and art in middle school and high school are electives. They're not subjects you have to take. So how can it be part of having an adequate education? You don't have to take it. So why the problem? So all that this does is changes the law a little bit. Doesn't say we're doing away with it. Doesn't say we're doing world languages. It doesn't say we're doing. It's just that those are extra that most schools will do, continue to do. We're not doing away with it, but they're electives courses. So how can you say that the state's going to pay for an adequate education when you have saying you have to, right now it says you have to give all these courses? Nobody takes them. I mean, a lot of people take them, but they don't have to. So that's the big thing in that. Nothing going away. And so there's a lot of misinformation going around on that. So just to be careful on that. We had in home, so when you see people saying all these emails, I mean, yeah, it's the same. They got a little late on it because when we first heard the bill, when I did this, the same thing back 12 years ago, 11 years ago, we packed Reps Hall too with all the music teachers and the art teachers and all that, and the language teachers. I even got mail from the French consulate. But I do mail. I mean, it's bad enough when I get mail from out of state. I could care less. But mail from different countries. I mean, you know, like French. I mean, but they get filed in the circular file. But the thing is, it's like, no, we're not doing away with it. We're doing away with how funding is done. You know, and nothing doing away with how schools doing it. They can do it. It's focus. There's focus education and then sort of the extra. It's still going to be in the law. So, I mean, it's just the way all of a sudden people go, oh no, they're doing away. We're not going to have music. Yes, we are. I mean, I think at Campbell there's more music courses than other courses.
And when it comes down to it, all those choices are made by the school board because we have local control.
Right.
They figure out how to implement what's in the laws and what the requirements are.
Right.
And they're not limited to what's there.
Right.
They're supposed to be providing for what the people in the community are asking for.
Right.
And the people want those. They will provide them. And most of most of the school district budget's paid for by local property taxes
Right.
that already go to those same programs.
Yep. Yeah. So also too, thing coming up, we have, remember last year I put in the bill, no means no? And March 8th is election day. Is it also in Derry?
Yes, it is.
Okay. It's election day, you go vote. And remember, I brought this up last year on the legislative update. I put in the bill for no means no. For example, if a contract fails, like a teacher's contract or other contract fails, you can't no longer, like what happened 2 years ago, you can't go to a judge and the judge orders a special meeting. Judges can't do that anymore. That law was that bill was passed, the governor signed it. So this year on our budget, you'll see there's 2 contracts, and whether or not you vote for or not, I'm not telling you how to vote. But there's bill, they put in warrants after each one of the contract bills about if the bill fails, you can have a special meeting. No still means no, so I don't care if you vote yes or no vote no on that. The problem is when you have those special meetings, it's gonna have to be done in September or October, and nobody's gonna go to them, and because people know they have to go in March or February and March. They don't know, and the word don't have a local newspaper anymore, so nobody knows that. So just want to cover that. No should still mean no. So on that, so remember March 8th, go vote. We got school board people running and the contracts and the warrant. My bill on the default budget, I found that passed the committee, and I don't know, we'll be voting on that probably the 10th, maybe. That was my bill saying anything the governing body, the selectmen or the school board makes to their proposed operating budget, they must make those same reductions in the default. And that was the intent of the law. You notice if you look at that warrant for your budget, it specifically states, if this fails, you can have another special meeting. That's saying the default's supposed to be lower. Why would you want a special meeting if the default was always higher? And if you notice in our school board for the last, I don't know how many years, a long time, the default's always been higher. That's a game. Let's make the default higher. That way we won't lose the operating budget. So anyway, hopefully that passes to fix that, because the intent of the law, and the first few years of when that was called SB2, municipal ballot law, way back, and the first maybe 5-10 years, the default was always lower, and then they figured out games on how to make it higher. For one of the things is, for example, I think like this year, there's losing 3 teachers because the population going down. The 3 teachers are gone in the operating budget. I bet they're in the default. And that's one of the games they've been playing. And that, I think Merrimack also had that problem years ago. A lot of towns don't. I mean, they're playing like it's supposed to, but
Derry has the same problem. The default is always just a couple pennies above what the new budget is.
yeah,
strangely enough.
Yeah, I remember the funniest one was when our high school got paid off. And I expected, well, the default's got to be that much different because we don't have that bond payment anymore. It wasn't. It was still higher. So I remember when I was on the school board, the votes coming off from the school board was like 3-2, because 2 of us didn't agree with that. Yeah. So anyway, so I think we should end this up, and hopefully remember to vote on March 8th, and hopefully we'll see you in another couple of weeks with Erica again to go over some
Health, human services.
health and human services and
Yes.
some education bills that passed. Okay, so thank you, Erica, again.
Oh, thank you for having me, and I'm so glad that I can be on the show with you. You scared us the other day. I'm glad you're okay.
Thank you.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.